No? Okay. Christian, give us a second to just start letting in. There's about 11 people, and then kind of give Stephen a sense of when you're ready to start recording, and you do your, your introduction that you do.
Yep. Once everybody's in, just let me know, and I'll go ahead and start it off.
Got it. All right, us three will start admitting whoever we need to admit. Almost there, Christian. Okay. Okay, Christian, I think we have one more person we're getting ready to admit. Yaneli is her name, and after that, I think you could get started if you wanted to, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, I think you're good to go.
Okay, cool. So hello, everyone. Thanks for attending. This is our weekly ASI Convo Corner, in which we invite a special guest for the week with a topic in which students find interesting, so they can ask questions and or gain more insight on that specific topic. In previous weeks, we've had topics about mental health, those about basic needs, and those around general questions around the credit, no credit conversation that's taking place on campus. For this week, we do have our special guest, Dr. Thomas Parham, who is the university president. So with that, I would just like to welcome everybody into the conversation this week and invite Dr. Thomas to the floor to kind of introduce himself and say a couple introductory remarks.
Thank you, Christian, and let me say good afternoon to everybody. I appreciate the invitation to join this Convo Corner. So appreciated the invitation extended on your behalf by way of your student body president. I want to thank him and this entire AS Council and Executive Board for their leadership with our students, and I'm always glad to participate. So without any further ado, let's get to cracking.
Cool. And with that, we'll just start off with a generic kind of introductory remark. So, during this time, what are some things that the university has taken a step towards to kind of ensure that academic classes and the means of the university still continue to progress throughout the pandemic.
So I should start by sharing with our audience that not just as a university president, but as a psychologist who's kind of dealt with crisis and emergencies all my professional life, that what crisis does is it reveals character. What crisis does is it exposes weakness in an organization or entity. But what crisis also does is it provides opportunity. And I think we've seen each of those things emerge in the midst of this. Revealing character, it really demonstrates how people have responded to that. And I think our student body has exercised enormous patience, understanding, and really empathy as we move through that. I think our faculty and staff have responded appropriately to that, always trying to make sure that we can provide the best support and accommodation we can to students. And you've seen that play out in a couple of the policies most recently. It also exposes weakness. And as we've had a chance to take a look at our organizational entity and about our capability to deliver on the promise that we have in terms of our educational mission and our capacity to do the things we need to do in the environments that we're in, it has exposed some interesting pieces about technological capability. Do we even have enough computers on loan for students to get? Even if students get a computer, do they have the capacity to use it and have the infrastructure, the bandwidth, et cetera, that's there, et cetera? Do we have enough cleaning crews to keep places disinfected? Do we have enough masks, et cetera, to support those people who are considered essential personnel? All those things have gone into the equation. And even as it reveals opportunity, the opportunities for us to either A, push pause, or what I like is to B, think about continuing to move forward so that whenever we are green lighted to move and transition out of crisis mode into whatever our new normal is going to be in terms of reset, we are poised and positioned to kind of take our place in terms of moving with that. So that's a long preamble to say that this crisis has allowed us to do some things to be able to support, I think, our student body. One is we transitioned to a more virtual environment. It is important that people remember that we have not closed the university. The university is still open and thriving. We are simply doing so in a virtual reality. There are personnel on campus. Most of them are away. We've got to make accommodations for faculty who are above a certain age, who may have comorbidity in terms of other risk factors that we have to accommodate, including your president. So I'm having to lead and manage the university from my home by directive of the governor because I just happened to turn 65 last year, and because I had a health crisis last year that makes me one of those immunosuppressed kind of folk recovering from that. My health is fine, but we're having to navigate that, and my challenges are no different than anybody else who's been on campus to do that. So I'm proud of, I think, the accommodations that we've made. We're trying to be as transparent as possible, which is what I promised you as a leader when I came. So I try to put out sometime daily messages, sometime every other week, or I'm saying twice a week messages, and sometime even more occasionally. Last week, I think we put out 3 messages in one day about various things going on. But all that is designed to try to keep people informed about what it is we're doing and how we're adapting to the crisis, even as we have to be comfortable in this climate of ambiguity, because there's a whole bunch we don't know. And I can go into those factors later if you'd like. Our job now is to try to finish the semester strong, make sure that we can provide a little bit of flexibility for students to be able to navigate this space, which is what I think we've done with the grading policy. We have extended deadlines for new student enrollees, both on the transfer side and the freshman side, and relaxed applications, and are trying to do things now to provide broad consultation as we plan for what the fall is going to look like, which is still a little bit up in the air. We're planning a town hall next, want to say the 5th, which is Tuesday, I think is the date, where we'll just open it up so that I can seek some broad input and consultation from a broader array of students. Your student body president and I talk, every couple of weeks, I guess, once with the Toro team luncheon, the other in our one-on-one. And he keeps me appraised of what's going on, but I wanted to make sure that we could reach out to the broader campus community to just seek their input and guidance about how they're feeling, what they're thinking, and where we need to go. So that's a broad summary of all the things that we have been doing and haven't done. Zoom has also been interesting because while we used to have transition time between meetings, now there is none, since you don't have to get in your car and drive to this part of the city or that part of the county, or come to this part of the campus and walk around. So the meetings have actually increased today. So if yesterday is a good example, I started at 7:30 in the morning. My last Zoom call was from 8 to 9 o'clock at night. And those are the kind of days we work 24/7, 365 on behalf of the campus to try to make sure we can manage this while we are literally drinking from a fire hose and trying to absorb all the information that's there and make the best decisions that protect the health, safety, and welfare of this campus community.
Gotcha. Thank you. And to your point, right, the campus has done many things and has shifted rather rapidly to keep up with the pandemic, and we applaud the efforts for the different divisions that are responsible for that work. Earlier in your kind of remarks, you mentioned the different fees and how the campus is still open. A conversation earlier during this time was around fees and whether or not certain fees will be reimbursed and different things like that. Can you speak a little bit towards that?
Sure. So in a general model, I think, let me start with the preamble on that one too, which says that the nice thing about being a not-for-profit entity, which is what educational institutions and universities are, in this case, is that we don't charge money that A, we don't need, or B, does not support the infrastructure that allows us to deliver on the promises we make in terms of supporting education of our students. And so the fees that are collected from everything from supporting the infrastructure and debt service on a building to the fees that put the personnel in place to be able to provide services, whether they're career-oriented, mental health, physical health, advising, et cetera, any of those things that are in place to do that. There are some fees, however, that we have that all have an impact on what we do, but are more specific to a service that people receive, and that in our perception are services that there is no way that a student can receive. A great example of that is housing. So normally, if you were in a certain situation and you sign up for housing, you would be expected to be able to, live out your stay to the extent of the contract and then disengage at the end of the year. With us having to tamp down the number of people who are on campus and people not being able to take advantage of housing, there are a number of people who have relocated and moved out of housing. So that is one of those things that we decided to provide refunds on. Another category, I think, is parking, where the rules allow us to be able to refund parking permits, even though, by the way, that is not without cost, because the parking permits don't simply support your ability to park on campus. Those are fees that are collected that allow us to not simply employ personnel, but to put reserves aside that allow us to resurface the roads, that allow us to put reserves aside that maybe open up new parking structures, which we're going to need and we should have had probably years ago. So all those things are in place. So when we think about refunding parking permits, all it does is it gives folk a little bit of relief in terms of whatever the prorated amount they got returned is. But there's also a cost to that, because whatever reserves we were putting up to be able to resurface roads, build a parking structure, do something else, is now not going to get done because of the dollars that aren't there. We've also made provisions to try to, as much as possible, to the degree that we've had state funding versus auxiliary enterprise, to keep students employed to the best that we can, so that students who are working sometimes 1 and 2 jobs, and a couple even more than that, have an opportunity to still earn some dollars that they desperately need to support their own, academic affairs and lifestyle. So we've tried to continue to do that, but that's a little bit about those fees. Now, there are some fees that exist that are related to the services that people receive. There are health center fees, there are mental health fees, there are, et cetera, et cetera. Those particular services, to the degree that we continue to provide them, and we do, we have decided not to refund because those services are still being delivered even in a virtual reality. It's also important to remember in some categories of fees where, trying to think of a good analogy. If you've ever gone to a print shop, anybody ever printed? Let me see hands. Who's gone to a print shop to try to print something like back in the day, right? Okay. So when you go to a print shop, what you'll find out is if you print the first like 200 of these, it may cost like $10. But if you print the next 500, it costs you like another $2, right? Because most of the cost is absorbed on the front side with the setup and, et cetera, not on producing the actual paper things. Well, those kinds of fees are analogous to sometimes what we do in the university, where all the costs that we have are already borne up front to be able to do that. And so whether you have used a student center building with for 8 months versus 10 months, whether you have used a service for 8 months versus 10 months, the cost is already borne in the context of the availability of that particular service, not you can prorate it out from month to month to be able to do that. So we've tried to be as fair and accommodating as possible to our students, knowing that every dollar matters for our folk, and we try to keep fees low. But we've also got a responsibility to try to maintain the infrastructure of the university that allows us to support, right, the academic mission and be available for students whenever we return back to whatever our new normal is going to be. So that's what I would say about fees.
Got you. Thank you. And just a quick kind of break. I just want to remind all those that are guests to this week's Convo Corner that if you do have a question, please type into the chat box to either Geneva, Stephen, or Michelina, just so we can make sure that we get your questions answered. And with that, we'll get back
in. Stephen, raise your hand and right. What's up, folks? And where's Michelina? There she is. So hey, Mary. Okay, there you are. Okay. Y'all look like you're on the Hollywood Square. That's too old for y'all because that's an old game when I was growing up. But I'm trying to look at like all these zillion boxes across my screen, and it's everybody's face is about that big. So okay.
All right.
Nice old enough to keep up with that.
I said, Rashida, I hear
you. So going back to something else that I know a lot of students are talking about is around housing. So there is this concern of the housing date being a little bit too soon to ask students or request students to move out due to the pandemic and the environment that we're in. So is there any mindset to possibly push back the request or the ask of students to leave housing sometime in the June, preferably later June, just to give things to settle down and give more time for students to get their lives together before they are asked to move?
What I would do is housing reports through, let me invite folks to put their phones on mute too if you're not talking, because there's a lot of background noise. Thank you. Housing is one of those entities that reports through student affairs, and our vice president for student affairs, Dr. William Franklin, and he and his team do an excellent job. So if you send a note to Dr. Franklin or to Lynn, our housing director, we would be glad to consider that, and we're trying to do the best we can to provide accommodation for that. Normally, the way housing deadlines are set, it is because we have something immediately coming behind when students move out that we have to get ready for. In this summer, I think we have a little bit more flexibility because we have suspended operations during the summertime, which is also one of those things that's going to cost us dearly. But the suspension of those operations allow us a little bit more degrees of freedom because there's nothing we have to clean like immediately in order to get ready for the next group of people who might be coming in for some summer programs. And so we might have a few more degrees of freedom with that. So I would just send that request through Dr. Franklin and for his consideration, and let's see what we can do.
Yes, sir. Appreciate it. There was another question around summer housing. So just so we get that out there as well, that'll be another question that we send over to Dr. Franklin as well.
That's correct.
And next, students are also having trouble in this time dealing with their mental health, right? Whether it be through family, whether it be through academic or other external factors in their life, right? Is there anything one that the university is currently doing for those students that do need the mental health support, or is there something, or what is the university's mindset, right, towards looking into sponsoring additional mental health programs to support those students?
So delighted to do it. And the way that our mental health operations work is it's a fairly uh, tuned kind of proactive developmental culture where we rely both on students to come in to say, I'm presenting with an issue of X, and we have everything from an adjustment disorder all the way up to somebody who's struggling with bipolar and everything in between. The anxieties of the moment are very pronounced. The fact that people are struggling with health crisis and their families, the fact that people are struggling with loss, not just about life, but about certainty, about meaning in life, about what does that mean about their future. All those psychological dimensions of loss are things that people are struggling with. And so we invite folk to access the mental health center. The mental health center, in fact, is available. And one of the things that we have embraced in a much fuller way than I ever have as a clinician myself in my lifetime is the telehealth and telepsychology. And those are things available. So in the same way that you and I are talking now via Zoom call, is the same way that students can access and talk to their particular psychologist. If there's something in particular that students would like to say, we think on behalf of this executive council, or Christian, you as a student body president, say, we would appreciate a broader campus forum on mental health or something that you'd like some folk to see. All that simply takes, again, is either a letter to Dr. Franklin where that reports, or a letter to Dr. McCarg, Janie McCarg. Dr. McCarg is our director of the health services and a mental health provider herself. And that letter will then generate our ability to be able to develop a forum that can do something like that. But we're more than glad to do that and accommodate student need around that, because I understand really firsthand why mental health is really important for our students.
Got you. And just to answer the ASI portion of that question, right? If there was something specific that you as a student is looking into, whether it be a program, an app, an environment, a setup, it's as simple as just coming in and talking to an exec or a staff member in the office and seeing what accommodations we can make to get that service provided to you.
That's correct. So let's make sure we don't confuse everybody. If you are an individual, so your name is Christian Jackson, and you decided that I need to see a counselor, you would simply call up the counseling center and say, I'd like to schedule an appointment in the same way you regularly would. The only difference is that instead of reporting into that mental health center, you will be given an appointment and you will be working like this. So you and I will have an opportunity to either be on the phone or on Zoom to be able to work with that. And we've made sure that our psychologists have the capability to be able to function in that realm. As all of them have been directed to telecommute because we're Tampa down staff, even though not all of them exclusively. There's some of them that are considered essential personnel that are in there. We've also had to accommodate the same thing on the medical side and physical health, as we provide that, both referral, questions, et cetera, that people can access to that telehealth space. So individually, that's what we want. On the group side, and this is what's really important, if, for example, you decided that we would like to have in our last 3 weeks of the semester a mental health forum, generally a noontime conversation with students about managing your mental health or coping with stress. What are some stress management techniques that we can use to be able to do that in a COVID-19 environment? That is a simple request that you can make to that director of mental health to say, would you get your team together and put together a circle, and we'll do our best to try to put together something virtual that we can plan to be able to help and accommodate and support students.
Got you. And the next question we have.
A question from, sorry to cut you off, but from one of the students inside of the chat. They are a clinical science student here at DH, and they're very proud to be a Toro. And they just wanted to say that they are grateful for the work that President Parham has been doing, but is also experiencing some challenges with an increased number of students being in the clinical science program. but there not being a good supply of course sections. So they don't have enough professors to facilitate the sections and have been caught up and have not been able to get the classes that they need. So they just wanted to know if there's any long-term strategy that can remedy the issue.
So sounds like that's a pre-COVID-19 strategy, because whatever existed pre-COVID is able post-COVID. But while we think about, what happens, we look at, long answer to this, we look at the enrollment numbers, and we look at who's enrolled, how many people there are, how many people are in a college and a major, et cetera, and try to then make determination about our faculty capability and then our ability to ramp up how many adjunct faculty we may need to have so many sections to be able to teach a course. So it's a dynamic kind of situation, because we have to have so many faculty to teach so many students, and you have to blend that out. If there's an occasion where we don't have enough sections and too many students who can't either get to or get into the courses that are provided, what I would do is make a plea to that department chair and to that dean, because they're the ones who schedule those. So our interim dean for Health, Human Service, and Nursing is Claudia Payton, and Dr. Payton certainly is available to do that. That is also a realm that within our Division of Academic Affairs, that dean reports to that provost, and our provost, Mike Spagna, would be delighted to hear about that as well. So there isn't much we can do about that now with 3 weeks left in the semester, but if there's a challenge going forward, we want to make sure, and we spend a fair amount of detailed time on this, trying to predict how many sections we have to have given the enrollments that we have, and we'll begin to look at that. I'd want to know something about also, Rahab, what the attribution a student would make about why it was difficult to get a section. Is it that I tried to get a section, but it was too full and they wouldn't let me in? Is it there were 3 sections offered, but none of them were convenient with the time because I always work and do some other stuff? Like, what's the attribution we make about that? Because we can't prescribe remedy about what to do until we know specifically what the issue is that we can try to accommodate. But the answer I just gave you really assumes that perhaps there weren't enough sections, which is what you described, and we need to create more of them. That's a simple piece of being able to get to the department chair and to the dean, and then to our vice provost of academic affairs, Ken O'Donnell, who do that kind of academic planning and modeling, which arguably is not as precise as science, but we try to make it as precise as we can to accommodate all the enrollment numbers that we have for students. But thank you and that student for their question.
Got you. And to circle back to another housing question, so there are also students at Marymount College as well, right? So if there's any accommodations or modifications made here at DH, right, how will that affect or be translated over to the students also at Marymount College?
So a student is a student. A student is a student is a student. If you're talking about Dominguez Hill students who live at California Marymount University accommodations, they are simply complying with the same directives that we have all been advised to comply with. So if we have to tamp down the dorms, they have had to cut down their dorms. If there are 1 or 2 students who are either guardian scholars who don't have a place to go, who are from out of state or international, who can't get to where they need to go and need to hunker down in housing, we have about not quite 100 of them, maybe more or less, in our own dorms itself. They would be allowed to be able to stay there, but the governor's directive and everything has been pretty clear with what we have to do as education students. Those are being tamped down, so they're being provided with the same level of accommodation and courtesy that every other student at Dominguez Hills is.
Got you. Thank you.
Dr. Thomas, I have a question here from a student saying for CBAP, the ACCSB accreditation, what's the status, and has the action been delayed because of the virus, if you're aware?
So great question. Everybody know what we're talking about? Let me see head nods. Okay, so a lot of people head no. Okay, so within our College of Business Administration and Public Policy, we have been probably on a 20-year, and I don't exaggerate that number too high, journey to try to achieve accreditation for that college. And so in the last couple of years, and it takes about 2 or 3 years to do this, our dean has been very specific and intentional about wanting to go after that accreditation from that accredited body. In that you have to produce, first of all.
I'm good, how are you?
Somebody needs to be on mute, sounds like. That accrediting body allows us to do, first of all, a self-study, which we've done. They then allow you to come back and schedule a visit by an accrediting body, which they do come to the campus. They have been. They then render a report, which they did, and then they allow you to make whatever adjustments you can to be able to work with that. So the self-study's in, the visit has been scheduled, it took place, they came, provided their feedback, we have then made adjustments, and so now we are in that space of waiting on them to render their verdict. What will happen after that is there are some accrediting activities nationally that have been suspended. There are some in the middle category that have agreed to take place, but to complete those virtually. And we are one of those folk who they have agreed to do the final meeting virtually. So if everybody can just do this, like, whew, right? That is about the best news we can have as an institution. So it means that they are still looking at us. And I don't know what the answer is going to be. There's a site visit committee that then recommends to a broader committee that then recommends to the whole board of this professional association. But that accreditation is really a gold standard for what it is that we want. And in my opinion, as I look at all the data that we have submitted forward, we have done what we needed to do to be able to have a positive outcome. So we just have to now wait on that accrediting body to get back to us. I don't expect that'll happen before this summer, is my guess, given how everything in the country has been pushed back and is slower. People can't travel, you know, people are telecommuting, adjusting to that. But I'm at least happy that we are in the queue and we are poised and ready to receive, you know, whatever determination that they will make. So keep your fingers crossed. That is a big deal. In the same way that when I arrived in 18, we had just gone through our WASC accreditation. And those are the agencies that accredit entire universities. Some folk get 6, 8, and sometime a full 10-year. We got a 10-year, full 10-year accreditation for our university, which is a big deal. And very unusual, by the way, when you have a brand new president and leader coming in. That's almost an automatic 8. Because they're not sure about what the leadership is going to be. So I think whoever your last president is, that was Willie Hagan, had to do some major convincing on that accrediting.
Less noise.
To say, we trust this new president coming in, take a look at his credentials, et cetera, et cetera. Somebody must have agreed because they gave us 10 years. And I would love to say that I had something to do with that. I didn't. I simply am a beneficiary who is blessed to receive that on behalf of all of our students. And that's a big deal. I'm hoping we can do the same thing relative to the business accreditation. So.
Gotcha. Thank you. So the next question we have is around the graduation or celebration for the student graduates that we have, right? So during this pandemic, different universities are saying different things as far as what they'll do, whether it be a postponement, a modification of the graduation or celebration. Can you speak a little bit toward Dominguez's take on celebrating the graduates?
Sure. So this has been a conversation with our executive policy group, with faculty and other folk about that, as well as with students. And Christian has been kind enough to share the feedback from students with me as we have continued to meet. We have heard that we're not in favor of having a virtual commencement ceremony. And that is something that I absolutely agree with. So what we've done is we have not canceled graduation. We simply have postponed it. And we're not in a position to say like, so when's it going to happen? The short answer is we don't know. Being able to go to any activity on the campus requires that we meet certain guidelines and thresholds. Again, my primary concern is the health and safety of this campus community. So right now, we are in a mode of having to look at, can we get everybody tested in our environment? The answer is no, because mostly tests aren't available. If we could test them, could we track and trace everybody's movements to make sure that we're in those spaces? We can't, because we can't test them. Can we make sure that we can isolate those folk who are infected to make sure they aren't impacting the rest of the population? No, we can't. Can I look at what essentially is incidence and prevalence data? So everybody know incidence and prevalence? Let me see, head nods, yes, no. I see a lot of no's. Okay. So incidence is the number of new cases in a given time. So if this is Thursday and there were 10 new cases of COVID, that'd be the incidence. Prevalence is the total number of cases that exist in a given time frame. So if we had 10 cases Monday, 10 Tuesday, 10 Wednesday, 10 Thursday, then the total prevalence is 40, even though the incidence is 10. So what we have to look at as from a public health standpoint is, are the incidents tamping down so that we've had 8 cases last week, now we've got 6, now we got 4, now we got 2. And by the way, do we have the medical capability to be able to treat everybody who's been infected by the disease? And what do we know about those particular pieces? Can we isolate? Do we have all the protective equipment? Do we have blah, 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 blah? I mean, it's endless when you think about this. So right now, that's a long way of saying that if we thought about even putting on some kind of major event, the state who uses those same criteria that I just outlined to you, and the governor's laid out kind of a 6-prong factor statement, they have now said that the likelihood that we can hold any events that have any kind of crowd in them is about 0 in the immediate moment. And that's why we can't host commencement. It's just not safe. My preference would be that if all goes well and we get to some kind of new normal into the fall, that we schedule a commencement ceremony, a formal ceremony in December. And that would be my preference. But do not quote your president, say the president said it's going to happen in December. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying my ideal aspiration is hopefully we can get to it in December. But if we are not any safer in December than we are right now, we will not be holding any major gatherings to do anything. So we'll have it as soon as we can, hoping that we don't have to back all the way up into the spring of 21 in order to kind of combine ceremonies there, which would, I think, be more problematic. Lastly on that, I'll say that what we did not want to do is ignore or otherwise miss an opportunity to congratulate, recognize, and say thank you to those students who have worked just tirelessly, right, to be able to achieve this particular status and level of recognition. So we are looking at and currently planning, have been for a little bit of time, a recognition week where we will find a way to recognize those seniors and graduate students who will be graduating from the university with their degrees and moving to a status where they are crossing the threshold into wherever they're going in their academic discipline and the workplace. And we don't want to miss an occasion to try to celebrate and recognize them. So we're looking at doing some live things. I may record some video messages. Other folk are going to be doing things to try to recognize students in those particular ways. So that's what I can tell you about commencement and graduation.
Got you. And just a sort of question furthering that, would it be a mindset to look into as far as allowing 2020 fall graduates to walk during that celebration, if there were to be a celebration during that time?
During what time?
So if commencement was pushed back into December at the end of the fall semester, would the graduates or the students that were able to graduate during fall 2020, would they be allowed to walk as well?
Yes. So whether the ceremony we plan is December, if we have to take it into January, if we have to do it during March and spring break, I don't know. I mean, anybody who tells you they're for sure they know what's happening is just guessing. But would they be able to walk in terms of a full ceremony? And will we get in kind of academic garb to kind of do that? The answer is yes. Will we have to create a new normal that employs all the public health advisories and guidelines about how we have to do what we do? The answer is yes. I don't know whether we'll be shaking hands or we'll be making people stand in masks and say wave and do whatever. I don't know. Like the way we have graduations now, we could not possibly employ a 6-foot distancing perimeter, right? That everybody has to be able to adhere to in the kind of accommodation that we have now. We have to rethink all of that. But again, that is contingent upon the guidance that we get from the state government officials, local mayor and county supervisors, public health advisors, and our medical experts, the CSU system, as well as our own internal executive policy group that helps us make those kind of determinations, including input from our students about what they like to do and what they are most comfortable with.
Got you. And as more information comes out, it's looking more like summer courses will be online, right? So for those online summer courses, how will the fee associated with those courses change, if at all?
I don't see the instructional fees changing at all, as long as we are prepared to deliver instructional content, that the learning outcomes for those courses have not changed fundamentally, then I think those fees will be substantially the same. You know, if you're in parking permits, we won't have a need to have those. If you're, you know, in housing contracts, nobody will be staying in housing during the summer. So, you know, we'll have those. But short of that, you know, I expect everything to continue.
Got you. And so recently there was a notification or an email sent out about an employee or somebody contracting COVID-19, right? And there's a lot of concern, and a student just wanted to know if there will be any information sent out about whether or not that person was somebody that they were in contact with, just to kind of alleviate some of their nervousness.
Right. So this is one of the things I want to say, and I want to say this as honestly and as empathically as I can. One of the things we have on this campus is a culture where folk are allowed to either send out information and do other things that in some cases is not necessarily reliable or accurate. And I don't want to question people's motives at that point. That's not the context of this Convo Corner. But I can tell you for sure that it's not reliable. So what I want you to trust is that the first thing I put out on every communique that I send that officially comes from me or one of my surrogates is that the principal issue we attend to is the health and safety of this campus community. That is something I'm not prepared to compromise, like not one bit. And so when I send out that advisory to do that, know that every decision we make is done in consultation with government officials, public health officials, and other folk, and they really advise us on what steps to take. And so for that particular employee that we had, and we've had a couple cases that we watched, but knock on wood, didn't come to fruition. Good news. The one employee that had already been home for like a couple weeks or more. Actually, it was more than that. It was almost like 21 days or something when they started being symptomatic and found it. So we simply chose, in a spirit of transparency, to report it. But based on public health guidelines and advisories from them, they were clear that whenever the person contracted it in their particular local space, they were away from campus at the time in which that happened. So there was no exposure that existed on campus. I also put out an advisory that talked about one of our construction workers, these are the only 2 cases that we've had so far. So everybody knock on wood if you got a desk near you, because we just got lucky on this one. But one of our construction workers who is building one of our dorms tested positive for that. But when they found out that the person was having even the first symptom, these are people who work in a very confined environment because the construction facility is walled off from basically the whole campus, so nobody can get in or get out. Not our grounds workers, not our students, not anybody other than that crew. That particular crew, because this was a subcontractor, was totally detailed after the fact. And this person, when they were symptomatic, wasn't even allowed to be in the job site. They got screened before they even got into the campus. And on the work site, got sent home to say, go check it out. End up being at home in isolation, reported later on, within a day or two or three to the doctor. The doctor tested it. They found that they were positive and then have been in quarantine. And everybody who was on that crew who worked, even with all the masks, et cetera, that they have, has also been in quarantine. So the level of exposure to the campus has been like zero. So, when you hear stuff like that, know that that is things we pay attention to. Know that those advisories we make in public health, and public health determines, right, who we need to call, how we trace, how we track, what's the movement of this particular individual in those particular spaces, and then they determine, and in fact, even notify some of those folk who were there. So out of an abundance of caution, I try to be transparent in my messaging. But if there were a need to be able to notify folk that you have been exposed, so go get tested, we would certainly let folk know. Uh, with all due respect to HIPAA requirements that require that we keep public information safe and confidential, those individuals would be able to go and seek medical treatment and care from their local physician.
Gotcha. Thank you. And just a warning, rather, it's 10 minutes left, so we'll try to field as many questions as we do have lined up in the queue. Anybody that has a last minute question, we'll try to get it in. So make sure you send it, and we'll see if we can get it answered if possible. The next question from a student was around professors, whether or not professors will receive additional training to boost their virtual or alternative means of instruction. I know this was also a conversation that we had earlier in the semester with Dr. Spagman.
Right. So the short answer is yes. So since point values are doubled, I will be quick in my answers. The answer is yes. That part of the professional development plan we will have for this summer is putting together some workshops to be able to upskill the faculty necessary to be able to work in a more virtual environment. So the plan is, yes, we are doing that. Again, that's one of those things. What crisis does is it exposes weakness. So we have some professors who've never taught a class in a virtual reality or online. So we're looking at that even as they've had to adapt to the immediate moment. We have some majors, yeah, we'll want to, no, I heard that too. Whoever that is, we want to mute your phone. But we have some majors, for example, like our nursing folk who have to go out and get so many hours. It was like 25% in the virtual environment, but other ones have to be in face-to-face in person. Well, what the nursing board has done with the state of California is relax the deadline a little bit to say, all right, we'll go with 50-50. The same thing is true for our teacher candidates. The same thing is true for lots of folks. So we're trying to move in those ways to make the accommodations, but we're also inviting faculty to be as innovative as they can be in their instructional methodology and learning modules to make sure that they can accommodate the needs of students and provide the instruction in the best way possible. And if they need the other professional support and guidance, we are planning some of that wholesalely this summer.
Got you. So another question is around enrollment, right? A lot of people are wondering how school or universities will look or be affected after the dust settles as we look in the next fall. So is there any information you can provide as far as, the university's mindset towards fall enrollment?
So short answer is, I don't know. That sounds like one of those old James Brown songs that they asked him back in the day. They said, James, what you gonna play? He said, Bobby, I don't know. And that's a cute way of saying that enrollment is not a precise science in the first place, but it is contingent upon the new enrollees coming in, both for freshmen and transfers who've been admitted, our ability to yield that class and whatever numbers we have, as well as the currently enrolled students and their ability to re-register so they're coming back. And so we have relaxed deadlines, and the deadlines have now moved from May 1st into June 1st for people to send in their intent to register, intent to enroll, deposits and forms, etc. So right now we are simply basically waiting. So even if you took a point in time snapshot, it is not an accurate snapshot because we're not balancing apples and apples because the timelines are just different. Do I expect that the numbers will be down? Probably so. Do I know that for sure? No. And in fact, there's some people you see on national news who are talking about encouraging folk to take a gap year and take off because of whatever. That is the least thing I would do. I'd be going in the other direction. When the market is down, when employment is not readily available and lots of people have lost jobs, et cetera, that to me is the time to go to work and upskill, is to reinforce the ability to go back to school and to try to persevere through the adversity so that whenever the new normal takes place and we're released back out into society, you are better poised and positioned to accept the opportunity that is available because you now have that college degree. So I want to encourage all of you on this chat and conversation to encourage all your friends and family, relatives, you know, Instagram, social media friends, etc., to come to school and finish your degrees.
Gotcha. Thank you for the encouragement. So next, we have the
follow-up on that one, Christian. What do you think it'll look like, Dr. Parham, in the fall? If, you know, either way, if it's, you know, we figure it's going to be still some restrictions, maybe, you know, Governor Newsom yesterday, a couple of days ago, said that he had his planned stage return. So if we're looking at August, is it most likely going to be in a virtual environment, or it's going to be like maybe like a hybrid just to, you know, test it out? Because people have to start planning, yeah?
Well, we're in that mode as I started the conversation of doing fall planning as we speak. And part of the town hall is for me to solicit information next week from everybody who wants to participate, in addition to the conversations that are going on with deans and faculty and unions and other folk as we run this organization as well as staff. And so, again, we just don't know. I mean, I would, if I had my druthers, I'd start back face to face tomorrow, but it is not safe. And I've not seen a lot of evidence to tell me that it's about to be safe anytime soon. I mean, think about this, Rashida. If you could test literally the whole country, I mean, if I could trust what was coming out of the White House, right? And they said, oh, millions of tests are available. And then we find out that we have a fraction of them available and this many people that aren't tested. If we could test the whole country, we could put the country and open it back up tomorrow, because we could track and trace those people who were tested. We could isolate those who need to be isolated, and we could go even as we continue to kind of test and ramp up and do whatever in the virus. But we can't. And so there's no reliable way. As soon as we open it up, everybody who's in LA County, by the way, and those numbers are still going up, the mortality rate is still going up, we're still losing people, are not in the space to do that. So we can't make with any certain prediction what's going to happen in, you know, the week and immediate months ahead. If I had to guess, right, what we're going to do, I guess that we're going to start out for sure with some level of virtue. I don't know, you know, anybody, even I know some campuses are talking about wanting to go face to face tomorrow. But to me, I think that's not safe, and I won't risk the health and safety of anybody on this campus community to be able to do that. You have that promise from me.
Thank you.
I don't know, we got like 2 minutes left or 3 minutes left, so point values are tripled now, so go for it.
Okay. So if you can quickly speak to what the CARES Act is, one, I'm not sure how many of the listeners know what that is, and then what is the university's response or actions to the funds received?
So CARES Act is a big old document. I sit right here. We look at this kind of stuff every day, but it is it's a higher education emergency relief fund that is provided by the federal government through the Department of Education. And what they've announced is really a $6 billion, I think it's $6 billion is the number, that would be distributed immediately to colleges and universities around the country. And our amount of funding has been calibrated on the number of full-time students we have, on the number of those who are on financial aid and Pell eligible, the number of FAFSA formulas, who's full-time, part-time, big algorithm that gives us our number. The funds that are available are directed in 50% increments. 50% is designed to support students. And so we have applied, we met all the deadlines to apply. In fact, we applied the first day. Applications in, they've received it. We are waiting, right, that to be processed. And as soon as the funds arrive, the 50% of those funds that will be available, we will be trying to get out to students so that the money can get into student hands. And so We have calibrated modeling to align with federal guidelines that tell us that the money is to impact and provide relief for COVID-related activities, and to be able to go to the neediest students, to be able to go to full-time versus part-time, to be able to, blah, blah, blah. So with the Pell eligibility, we have some students who are Pell eligible that have the EFC of 0. We have some who are Pell that have, a greater expected family contribution. Those are all things that we have to calibrate in terms of the models, and so people will receive incremental funding based on that. And what we're trying to do as our campus is, I think whether you're full-time or part-time, I think whether you're in a business major or a health sciences major, everybody is being impacted in a similar way. So we're trying to provide a little bit of funding for everybody, even though we know some people are more needy than others. And so the modeling we have will dole out the highest amount of grant for those people who are the most needy with an EFC of 0, and a lesser amount of grant for those folk who have less need but are still have some. So as soon as the money is available, we're ready to go. We have our financial aid mechanisms in place. We have a list of folk who didn't apply for FAFSA. We have all that. And in fact, the federal guidelines, I should say this too, have already determined that there are a certain cohort of your students who are not eligible for the federal funding. And that includes undocumented students, it includes international students, and for us, DACA students. So what we're trying to do is see if we can't scrape together some other pennies and be able to provide relief for those students as well. So that even though we can't provide federal dollars out of this CARES Act money, what we can do is try to find some other resources that we can to try to make them whole as well. So we have executives around trying to do that to support our students as well. But there are a few of them who are not going to be eligible because either A, they don't qualify and their families make too much money, or B, they're in one of those other categories that don't allow them to get funding.
Got you. And if I could just spitball last two questions at you. So the first one would be, as the pandemic kind of caught everybody, off guard, and a lot of people had to make rapid modifications, right? Is there anything as a university that we can take from this just to prepare ourselves in the future if a situation like this or an emergency comes forward, that we can adjust and make accommodations?
So pandemics like this come along every 100 years or something. So this is the first time I've been through something like this in my lifetime. But every moment is a teaching moment, I believe. And so even as this has revealed character, it has exposed weakness, and it has provided opportunity. What we are doing in the middle of the health crisis is trying to take all the lessons we learned. One of the first things I did was activate our Emergency Operations Center. So for those of you who don't know how that works, it is a separate group of people who are charged with particular positions, who look at everything from management policy down to ordering logistics on down to, doing a whole range of things that support that. And that Emergency Operations Center helped us really know and not know about how we were able to accommodate a lot of things on campus. And it's everything from, do we have enough computers for folk? Is the policy right to do X or Y? Should we provide refunds to folk? All the way to, do we even have the capacity to clean classrooms and the maintenance and janitorial staff sufficient to disinfect every place we need to go behind students, to make sure the environment's there? I mean, the range is huge. So it's let us know, one, how thin we are, two, how well we need to shore up some of that. And as we prepare going forward, even in a budget crisis that's coming, how we can make determinations to try to shore some of that up, so that if we have a new rise and uptick in the COVID-19 stuff, which people are predicting, we are better prepared and able to be able to do that. So if anything, this has been a teaching moment and a good exercise to be able to do that.
Thank you. And
go for it. Go something else. I got a couple more minutes.
The last question I'll ask you, sorry to those that we weren't able to get your question in, but there were several students that came late and asked the question around fees. So if you can quickly kind of sum up, what is the university's response to fees and giving reimbursements?
Okay, and give me the other question too. I don't want to leave anybody out, so give me the other question that came in.
The other question was, how can we make sure that our professors are receiving the virtual instructions that you're providing them, right? So as you give instructions to a professor, how do we know, or how can we make sure that they're actually receiving the modes or suggestions for improvement?
So relative to the And whoever it is, let me invite you again to mute your phones because the chatter sounds really, really distracting. In terms of the fees, somebody asked a question about what are we doing to try to refund fees? And what I said is that there are certain fees we have made a decision to refund, like housing, like parking permits, etc. Those are services that we are receiving. There are other fees, however, that there are other fees, however, that we have chosen not to refund because the services are still being provided and the campus is open. And so that's what we are continuing to do. So that's a 2-second summary of that. If you are eligible to apply for a parking refund or housing refund, please make sure you do. If you vacated housing and haven't applied for your refund, please do. It is waiting for you and available to do that, and we're prepared to refund that. Relative to how do we make sure professors know? So even in the course of what we call academic freedom, professors have the freedom and flexibility to teach their courses in the way in which they like. And so even as we have directed that everybody go into a more virtual reality, they're trying to make the accommodations as best they can, which is why we took that, little pause back in early March. You remember I put the whole campus on pause for a couple of days to allow people to ramp up and to allow students to get used to this new reality. But we also recognize that there are a lot of our professors who need some professional development and help. And so we are preparing a professional development series of workshops this summer to help upgrade professors and their ability to deliver instruction in a virtual environment. So that's what we're looking forward to doing this summer.
Gotcha.
And obviously, and I should also say, there's a lot of peer support. There's some professors who are helping other professors, but I'm not the one providing the direction. My job is to be the orchestra leader, not necessarily play every instrument. Some of those instruments are being played at the department level with the department chairs, with faculty peers themselves, at the dean level, who then tap down that to their particular college. So all those discussions are happening in those ways, trying to ensure we have it. If you have feedback that would help us do a better job, simply pass that feedback along to the department chairs or to the deans, and make sure you copy the provost in on that, because we would like to know, and they'll inform me as your president about how well we're able to do that and what adjustments we have to make to be able to get it right or get it better if it's not as good as it needs to be.
Gotcha. So thank you for being so responsive to the questions and carving out some time out your busy schedule to come and talk to us. I'll thank you on behalf of myself, ASI, and the listeners. So appreciate you for that. And I would also be remiss if I didn't give you the floor for any last remarks or closing comments that you may have.
I simply want to close by saying thank you, Christian. Thank you to our AS executive leadership. Thank you for all of our students who are involved. Thank all of the staff and others who are on the call in the conversation corner. I hope it's been instructive. I need you just to keep us in your positive thoughts and prayers. I mean, we are navigating as best we can through uncharted territory. There is no textbook for what we are doing now. This is uncharted territory. So we are doing the best we can. What we need from everybody is to be encouraging and supportive. What we need is empathy, and what we need is compassion. What we need is folk to just kind of know that, yeah, things are going to be a struggle, but we'll get through this. And we need everybody to understand that we are all in this together. If you get some of these other communiques that float around campus that talk about this is a crisis, somebody's getting fired, this is a problem, I mean, trust but verify. Trust but verify that information to make sure that it's out there before you treat it as gospel. Because there are too many incidents that really concern me, that you have people out there putting out this kind of stuff in the way in which we manage information at this campus that puts communiques out that are just bordering on really irresponsible. And is not something we need. Everybody's anxiety is high enough right now without worrying about whether or not, there's a fire in the theater when there really is no alarm that should have been sounded in the first place. So we're moving into those spaces, and I think we're fine. Again, I want to thank everybody for your patience. I want to thank you for your understanding. I want to thank you for that kind of hard grit, turtle spirit that lets everybody know that we're all in this together. And find a way, even with your physical distancing, with your hand washing, other stuff, to give each other virtual hugs, to still hang in there, to help our students finish strong, lend support, welcome our new students into the Toro Nation, and we'll see what we can do in the weeks and days ahead. keep it posted. Your president's doing fine. I'm working hard on your behalf all day, all night, and weekends, trying to get it done. So that's my commitment to you. Thank you for having me, and appreciate y'all. Much love to everybody.
Cool, thank you. And with that, just a reminder, that was this week's Convo Corner. All the Convo Corners can be rewatched on the ASI website, ASI CSUDH /Convo Corner. Next week, again, from 3 to 4, we'll be interviewing Rahab Shoaib, who is the next ASI president, who will be taking over for myself and leading the charge for UTORs next year. As well as ASI will continue to put out social media stuff, surveys, and information. So please look forward to that. And be responsive as possible so we can just make sure we accommodate as much as your needs and requests as possible. And that was it. Thanks for coming, and look forward to next week.